What is really hanging up modern biology is its absence, its unwillingness to entertain the possibility that life is driven by purpose. This is an old chestnut in the philosophy of science. It's called the issue of teleology. Teleology is a fancy word meaning purpose. And what happened, you see, is it's just simply a legacy of our intellectual history. When Darwin developed the theory of evolution in the 19th century, English intellectual society was under the sway of Christianity. And it was possible, as recently as 150 years ago, to claim yourself to be an intellectual and to actually maintain in polite society that the earth was created by God at 9 a.m. on September the 4th, 4004 B.C. 150 years ago in England, people believed this with perfect confidence that they were at the cutting edge of intellectual understanding. Well, Darwin wanted to overcome deism, which was this all-pervasive belief in an interventionist creator who was literally guiding the flight of every atom and the fall of every leaf. And Darwin said, we don't need this kind of invasive, deistic plenum. Let's just take the process of mutation, a random process driven by he knew not what, we now know largely driven by incidental cosmic radiation reaching the surface of the earth. Let's take mutation and natural selection, another random process, and when we run these two random processes head on, lo and behold, out come flamingos, cockroaches, hummingbirds, coral reefs, palm trees, and ourselves. But I think that, and the co-discoverer of evolution, who, if I believed in reincarnation, I would claim him as my own, Alfred Russel Wallace, was unable to agree with Darwin, and he said, no, that accounts for minor change in organisms, natural selection. But how can you use those processes to account for something like, for instance, the metamorphosis of insects? A caterpillar changing into a butterfly involves the chemical coordination of hundreds, if not thousands, of genes doing a perfectly integrated and flawless ballet of transformation. How incrementally could you ever get a situation where a caterpillar undergoes mutation into a butterfly unless there is some third factor at work in evolution? And Wallace thought that it was an appetition, an appetite, a tendency toward an end state. And that compass notion of evolution means that you're steering toward a goal. Now, in common speech, when we use the word evolution, we usually mean this. But orthodox biologists, I remember when I was studying evolution, I had a professor who said, do not use the word evolution unless you are talking about a process involving genes. In other words, don't talk about the evolution of the novel or of abstract expressionism or the evolution of society or the evolution of a political viewpoint. This is all bad thinking. Well, people like Ilya Prigogine, Wes Churchman, Eric Jantsch have reclaimed evolution as the notion of progressive movement toward higher and higher states of development. But 19th century evolutionists refused to talk about advanced and less advanced or higher and lower when they talked about evolution. They just saw it as a random process playing itself out. I don't think so. I think we are called that nature is hyperdimensional in its architectonics, and that we are flowing toward a culminating purpose, probably the shedding of matter as the vehicle of our becoming. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you a question about, do you think the information that is contained in psilocybin, DMT, all the hallucinogenics, do you think that the information is self-contained, or is it actually more of just a way of tuning our brains into a more cosmic frequency that exists in the psilocybin, or is the psilocybin just a mediator to a drastic way of tuning into a more cosmic broadcast?
Well, it's hard for me to imagine that it could be in the psilocybin because psilocybin is a very simple molecule. I mean, it's a small molecule, it's a planar molecule. It seems to me what must be happening is that we are embedded in an ocean of information, and psilocybin somehow changes our channel slightly. Ordinary consciousness is created by a neurotransmitter called serotonin, 5-hydroxytryptamine, suggestively a very close relative of psilocybin and DMT. And it seems to me, I think I mentioned this a little bit in the talk last night, that we have evolved a neurotransmitter which has the effect of narrowing the focus of consciousness to what is operationally defined by the body as the here and now. In other words, the body is very fragile and sight-dependent and must be protected from high levels of radiation, inundation by toxic or life-threatening chemicals like water. I mean, you don't want to have the ocean wash over you or it's a problem. But that these pseudo-neurotransmitters, which are hallucinogens, have not been integrated into normal metabolism because they don't serve the body's need to preserve itself. But what they do serve is an expansion of mental function. And it may be, that these neurotransmitters are in the act of evolving. We no longer need to fear the immediate environment. Well, maybe that's a cheerful overstatement. But one would like to think that we no longer need to fear the immediate environment as much as we did when we were locked in competition with other animal species. Now, it's to me highly suggestive the fact that we contain and metabolize DMT in the course of ordinary metabolism. What does it mean that the most powerful of all psychedelic hallucinogens is a part of normal human metabolism? The pineal gland, whose function is very mysterious, is doing a lot of chemistry that looks like psychedelic chemistry. It's elaborating harmine-like beta-carbolines. So it's possible that literally, when we take these tryptamine hallucinogens, we are, as it were, dressing up in the mental furniture of the distant future, that we are experiencing a state of consciousness toward which we are naturally evolving, and that over time and through natural selection, the serotonergic neurotransmitters are making way for these more powerful psychedelic compounds. And this, and the fact, something like imagination looks to me like a self-generated internal involvement with compounds which at some point in the future might replace the compounds of ordinary metabolism and shift our mental life literally into another dimension. Yeah.
Anyone that uses organic psychedelics for a period of time as a daily dietary supplement, like every day for an extended period of time? Because nobody really talks about that. And I'm just
How much do you use?
a gram and a half.
Yes, well, one can do that. I've sort of thought that maybe this isn't such a good idea because I'm interested more in spectacular episodes of intoxication, with the exception of cannabis, of course, rather than integrating it as a lifestyle.
That's my question. Am I the only one that's doing this as a lifestyle? I mean, I feel really alone right now.
Well, is there anybody who wants to join this gentleman in his isolation? At times I've done that, but I found it to be, well, here's the thing. You have to get the dose. The dose is very critical. If you take, say, I would say a half a gram to a gram every day, my experience of that was simply a kind of anxiety, a kind of being set forward, a speed type effect. If you say, well, then I don't want that, so I'm going to lift the dose slightly, and you go to, say, 2.5 grams, the problem I had with that is life quickly evolves into being so strange that I couldn't handle it. In other words, it's very important for me to dip into these places and then to get out, towel off, and think about it. However, there is a streak of the chicken shit in me, I think. If you really want to leave us all behind, and bourgeois values and your job and Bill Clinton and the ozone hole and all of that behind, then if you start taking psilocybin, let's say 4 grams every 3 days, I guarantee you within a month there will be very few people that you will have much in common with. And you will be very happy. You will be very happy with your circumstance generally, I think. But you will have evolved a point of view, a set of values, an expectation that most people will find a lot of difficulty relating to.
Okay. We're talking like a shroom shake, let's say, fresh fruit, ice, a gram. You're looking at, what, maybe 3 to 5 hours of time involved with it?
Uh-huh.
So that leaves 20 hours left in the day to do everything else you need to do. I mean,
you do no, but what is the dose again?
Let's say a gram.
Huh. Well, I don't know. See, it may be just a matter of personal styles. When I take psilocybin, I give it 110% of my attention. So I can't do it and work at the computer or make phone calls or shop or deliver my children to lessons and stuff like that. And so my idea with it is to completely come down between doses, and then, you're virgin again. Yeah, you don't keep hallucinating. No, it becomes something else. See, I don't want you to feel PA, but I think that what people do with drugs that is probably a bad idea is they take too little too often. And that the best way to do drugs is to take very challenging doses, rarely. I mean, I used to say to my groups, if you haven't taken enough that you think you may have done too much, then you did too little. In other words, you really want to dissolve the boundary. You don't want to integrate it into this world. You want to have an experience which you can then integrate into this world after the trip.
But, You're the one that always talks about language and thought processes, and I feel as though most of my best work is under that period of 1 to 1.5 grams of dosage, and I just don't understand how, the recommended experience is much more than what I'm doing, obviously. And
well, have you taken large doses? Well, isn't that much more interesting?
I guess it comes down to what it is you're looking to do while you're doing it. It's not a matter of interesting, it's a matter of what your purpose is, what your intent is, what your trip is.
Well, at these higher doses, you can't do anything.
Of course, that's my point.
You hanging on to the floor is a major program to be executed. Yeah.
Can you exist let's say, a parallel universe? Can a person exist in the parallel universe?
You mean for days and days?
Well, yeah. I mean, could you live?
You can live, but you alarm your friends and quickly become an object of community concern because, for ordinary people, you are what is called nuts.
Doesn't the experience just become a type of almost like a three-dimensional TV? I mean, you're just visiting. It becomes a drug.
No, I think you underestimate how strange it is. I don't think you could ever get used to these places. Sometimes people ask me if DMT is dangerous, and the honest answer is only if you fear death by astonishment. And death by astonishment is a real danger in these places. I mean, these places are not simply strange or amazing or highly peculiar. They are absolutely confounding. I mean, that's what I'm trying to get across, is this is not going to require just some minor adjustment of our worldview. These are the things they said were impossible. The things they promised, assured were impossible, are possible. The greatest secret that has been kept from us is that the world is 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times stranger than your wildest supposition. And how they keep the lid on this stuff, I do not understand. I mean, I don't understand why I'm the only person saying this, because I'm completely convinced of my own ordinariness. I am only a human being. I represent all of you. What happens to me would happen to you. There's nothing special about me. Well then, my God, how do they keep the lid on this stuff? It's weird. It's more, if a fleet of flying saucers were to land on the south lawn of the White House tomorrow, it would not change the fact that the weirdest thing in the universe is the DMT flash. Flying saucers landing on the south lawn of the White House is a positively mundane possibility compared to this thing which is real. It's here, it's now. You don't have to go to Babaji, you don't have to go to the Himalayas. It's 3 tokes away. And yet, we argue, is it possible? What does it mean? Is it this? Is it that? It's amazing to me. I mean, it is the new world. The Europeans eventually discovered the new world, but they had to sail galleons 3 months through hell to get there. This is 3 tokes and 30 seconds away, and it is the absolute confounding exhibit of the whole structure of Western civilization. How can they keep the lid on it? I don't get it. This person.
Where does individual spiritual development fit in without the use of hallucinogens in your world or into your scheme of thinking? And 2, last night you talked about the business of being should be the cultivation of love, and I would like to hear more about that now or later. And then 3rd, I'd like to know, what do you think you would be doing today in life if you had never used any psychedelics?
Well, first to the spiritual question, which is an interesting question to me. Everyone casts the psychedelic experience in terms of being a subcategory of the spiritual quest. I'm not exactly sure about that. I've taken lots of psychedelics over nearly 30 years now, and, I have a marriage dissolving. I have people who will tell you I'm a terrible person to negotiate a contract with. I feel myself to be a moral paragon of nothing. And I'm not sure it has anything to do with the spiritual quest. It seems to me true spirituality is a very here and now matter. One should visit the sick and imprisoned, clothe the naked, bury the dead, care for orphans, feed the hungry. That's what the spiritual life is about. It's very down to earth, straightforward. I'm very puzzled, and I put more than psychedelics in this category. What, like mantras, yantras, practices, do these things really ameliorate the suffering of the human condition? They may be good for something. The question is what? Perhaps indirectly the psychedelics synergize the spiritual life because they just show you that life is to be taken seriously and there is a great deal of it to be assimilated. But in terms of suggesting that you are a more spiritually advanced person if you take psychedelics, I don't really see any evidence for that. I do think that you cannot take psychedelics without losing a portion of your ego, because it's too hard for the egomaniac to take psychedelics. The egoist will turn away from it, will have such bad trips that they will put it down, I think. This is an interesting question, this question of like the question I ask myself. Here we are psychedelic people, presumably by some high percentage. Are we in any way morally superior to people who don't take psychedelics? Maybe we're a little bit gentler and more open-minded, but probably in any mud wrestling situation we can be just as down and dirty as the next person to some degree. So I see it more as, that's why I don't think of myself as a guru. I think of myself as an explorer of a geography, the purposes of which are probably multiple. In other words, I suppose we can use psychedelics to shape personalities and brainwash people and control them. And I suppose we can use it to lead people to make peace with death, mortality, their own limitations. It seems to me it's a morally neutral dimension. And it can be used for good or ill, and maybe slightly edging toward the good, because it's very hard for egomaniacs to do anything with this stuff. The CIA's involvement with LSD is an instructive situation. The CIA got onto LSD well ahead of everybody else, and the first notion was, and if you're interested in this, you can read the other one, Acid Dreams, that book, Martin Lee's book, and Schlein was the co-author. The CIA's first assumption about LSD was that it was a kind of super truth serum, and that they could kidnap KGB agents and give them LSD and they would spew out all their contacts and so forth and so on. So a year of researching that possibility convinced them they were on the wrong track. And so then they decided it isn't a truth serum, It's an anti-truth serum. We will give our agents this drug, and if they ever fall into enemy hands, they will take it, and then it will be impossible for the enemy to get any coherent account out of them of what is going on. Well, so then a few months of that, and they discovered, no, under some circumstances, our people just tell all under LSD. So then they decided that they could program a Manchurian Candidate type situation with it. Well, then that was abandoned, and I think largely they have lost interest in this stuff. I asked in the Amazon, the mushroom at one point, because I could see that we were going to carry it back to the world in some form. I said, can't this be perverted? Can't it be misused? And it said, only the good can come near this. Well, maybe good doesn't mean exactly what we think it means. You know, it isn't a kind of piety worn on your cuff. It's something else. It's a sincere wish to understand. That's the motivation that the psychedelics will turbocharge. As to your question about what would I be doing if I hadn't taken psychedelics, well, I don't know. What I was doing, what I assumed I would end up doing before I took psychedelics was hopefully end up teaching art history in a very exclusive Eastern girls' school somewhere for a long, long time. It was a kind of Nabokovian lechery was my life's plan. And what was your... Oh, and love. Well, my analysis of what psychedelics do, if you think not about my trip or your trip, but thousands, tens of thousands of these experiences, what can we say that would be true of every psychedelic experience, every high-dose psychedelic experience? What can we say that would be a general truism? What you could say is that psychedelics dissolve boundaries. That's what they do. The boundary between nature and society, between mind and body, between self and other, they dissolve boundaries. And this is what love does when it is working right. I mean, you are able to place yourself in the second position for a child, for a lover, for a cause, for whatever it is. You know, you take second position. And so I see them essentially as aphrodisiacs of a strange sort. They empower not genital prowess, but real caring by showing that all differences are illusions, that what is real is the unbroken, seamless plenum of being. And this is what we need to learn